Good afternoon. This is Jared Forte, and welcome to another session number 15 of Notes from the Route. A little bit later broadcast today. Sorry for anyone who missed the notification. Um, Doing a little bit later in the day, but everything is all good. You can catch me. The regular scheduled time for this show is noon Eastern on Monday through Thursday. You can watch it right here on G Plus. You can catch it on my YouTube channel. If you're watching it there, just hit subscribe and you'll never miss an episode. Also, you can catch back episodes and read more of the ideas that we talk about here at my website, jaredforte.com. Also, as you can see, I'm promoting my Twitter feed, so follow me on Twitter. Continue the conversation over there. Wherever you happen to bump into me, I'm always willing to talk about ideas or anything that's related to the things that we cover or that I cover in the notes that I go over on these daily or 4 times a week broadcasts. I look forward to incorporating your feedback in the work that I do going forward. So the topic of today's episode or session is why working deep is so scary. And I have to speak for myself. It is scary to think of the idea of really going deep into a particular field of endeavor or a particular project. That depth is a scary thing, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons why and why it's valuable and why it's scary and kind of what to do with that sort of internal battle that goes on whenever you are faced with those types of decisions. So the number one reason why I think deep is scary is because opportunity costs are infinite. Now, what I mean by that is everything that you choose to do, everything that you invest your time and your energy into, you do that at the expense of every other thing that you could be doing at that moment. And there's an infinite number of things that you could be doing at any given time other than what you choose to do. So all of those options, from moment to moment, you are foregoing an infinite number of different options that you could have. And the more you string together your activities along a particular course of action, the more those choices seem to be limited. And the idea of eliminating choices, because we're so in love with the idea of having freedom of choice, the idea of taking courses of action that limit choices can be an anxiety-producing thing. It can be really scary. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about 3 different ways that people, businesses, organizations deal with this reality, this universal reality that opportunity costs are infinite, that there are always trade-offs, even in what seems to be the best course of action that you could imagine. There are always trade-offs. So we're going to look at the ways, sort of 3 different ways that people deal with this reality. Now, the first way is the urgency approach. The urgency approach is where you have a very present and sort of visceral reaction to the fact that, okay, the stakes are really high here. I have limited time. I have limited resources. These things have to be done. There's so much going on. There's a very push. It's something that really pushes you forward. It's a driving force. And when people act and people move and live their lives with a sense of urgency, a way to think about that is there are people who kind of approach situations with a certain amount of abandon. They have a certain freedom of motion, and sort of they appear to be beyond or above the fear of failure that holds a lot of people down. And there's something really romantic about the notion of understanding the finite nature of your time here, understanding that this is your only life and these are your only these are your only collection of moments, and trying to live and make the most of every one. that's a very powerful way to think about how to live your life, and it's a very romantic notion for people who, when you look and see people who seem to be living their lives that way, it is very seductive. It's incredible. It's inspiring to see people who live with such abandon and who seem to be fearless. The challenge with that approach is a lot of times there's something called the survivorship bias, which means the stories we see of the people who conduct themselves that way, the businesses that take bold risks, the stories that we hear about are of the successes. We have a skewed view of what the consequences of approaching every situation in your life, or every um, opportunity that seems to present itself, throwing yourself into it that way. We have a skewed view of the consequences of that type of approach, because the stories that we see are the ones that make it. We don't see the vast majority of people who throw themselves out there or throw themselves into something perhaps ill prepared, perhaps being driven by fear, perhaps being motivated by some force, but ill prepared to handle the situation, and they fail. And then there's huge consequences of those failures. So as romantic as that notion is, and as inspiring as it is to see, that is just one way to approach this infinite opportunity cost situation. Another way is to just simply ignore it, or to pretend like it is not the case that you are eliminating your options. And you don't really make choices, you don't make really strong actions, but you also you just kind of glide through things on a default and kind of go with the flow. And you become your options are limited by default, not because you've made a purposeful decision, but because as time goes by, you disqualify yourself for certain courses of action because of your neglect. And this is sort of the approach of the victim, or the approach of a person who is resigned to be the victim of circumstances, or the uh, who sort of surrender their ability to have any impact on the situations or the substance of their lives. That's one way to deal with it. You can just ignore it and pretend like it doesn't happen. And the third way is a purposeful approach. Now, when I say purpose, that's sort of a loaded word. I don't mean that you have some overriding grand view of everything. It just means that you understand the gravity of the situation. I mean, you know that your choices are going to lead you down a road that is getting progressively narrower. But rather than approaching it with abandon and perhaps recklessness, you have some poise about it. You basically just march through. Now, regardless of which way you choose to address this situation, whether you are living wide open with abandon, or you're approaching it with gravity and poise, or you're just floating along, there's no guarantees that anything that you do is going to work out. Um, all paths are inherently risky, because you don't know with any degree of real certainty what the unintended consequences are going to be. So let's dive a little bit deeper into these three paths and kind of get a clearer picture of what they look like. First, let's start with, let's kind of dismiss the path where you just ignore it and you just kind of float along. There's nothing really to say about that. I mean, if that's what you're doing, it's helpful to recognize that's what you're doing, and not to expect things, to expect to ever gain any semblance of control over any aspect of your life, because unless you make decisions, you can't have any real control. So let's just set that one to the side, and let's look at the other two. First, let's look at the urgent sort of approach. Some of the characteristics of this approach to the problem of depth, or in this case, is really a lack of depth. Um, Urgent situations tend to be, or when you interpret things through a filter of urgency, then you bring in a lot of noise because you are hypersensitive to the environment, because you understand, okay, everything around me is changing, and my actions are going to be sort of dictated by, I'm going to be sensitive to what's going on, let's say, in a market. I'm going to be looking for opportunities. I'm going to be looking for ways that I can make an impact or build something or create something. I'm looking for a niche. I'm looking for an angle. Okay, so that's what you think, and then when you see it, you have to pounce on it. So you're hyper reactive. You see an opportunity, you jump on it. In the urgency paradigm, it has to be a very data-rich paradigm. There's got to be a lot of inputs and information that you can look at and say, okay, given all of these different things, okay, what are my opportunities? Let's try something. Let's test something. And fortunately, we live in a world that has a lot of these. There's a lot of information available that can inform your choices if you're going to operate on this paradigm where you're going to seize maybe closing windows of opportunity. When you're an opportunist and you see a weakness in the marketplace, you jump on it and you milk it for what it's worth, because you know that it's a limited time, and you jump in there and get that. And you have to go in. So the good news is there's plenty of data out there. We have access to almost unlimited information that you can look at. You can look at a market, you can look at a situation, and pull together a pretty interesting picture, a pretty complete picture of what's going on, and say, okay, given these factors, here's an opportunity. Let's go do it, and let's attack it. So how well you can do with that situation, how well you can do when you're looking to jump in and jump through these closing windows of opportunity with your product, your service, is how well you do is determine how good your filters are, how good you are at aggregating, filtering, and interpreting the information that is coming your way. So you have to be really good at dealing with that noisy environment. And the words that kind of come to mind when you think about companies that do this, if you look at the startup community, it's full of these types of businesses. They're extremely nimble, they're light, they jump in, they have an idea, but they're ready to pivot. And there's a lot of money that gets thrown at people who have ideas, and sometimes it's not even about the idea, it's about the confidence that the investor has in the person. You can look at incubators where people get into programs, and the idea that they start out with isn't the one that they end up bringing to market, but the investors felt like, well, these people are good at this type of environment, this urgency-driven environment, this noisy environment. They trust the founders to be creative and energetic enough, and have enough abandon in the way that they approach the market to be able to sift through all of that data, identify opportunities, and really get a really tight feedback loop so that they can build and iterate on an idea. And that's the skill, and that's an extremely valuable skill. Some of the challenges with that is there's a lot of drama there. I don't really have an appetite for that kind of drama. It's a high energy, adrenaline filled, real hustle heavy environment, and it can be a powerful thing, but also you can get addicted to that adrenaline. The idea of serial entrepreneur is a relatively new concept. If you look back at the titans of industry in the past, the people who created wealth in the past, once they had their idea, they built it over the course of a lifetime. It wasn't a series of different ideas that progressively got bigger. It's they were seized by this idea, they committed themselves to it, they dug deep with it, and they built the Fords, and they built the Standard Oils, and they built the Carnegie Steels, those huge businesses. They might have had a series of failures So you could call them serial entrepreneurs in that way. But they didn't go from one business that worked to another business that worked. They didn't look to exit once their business was sound. But there is a certain energy that's in a startup environment. There's a certain thing about something that's new that is very enticing, and you can become addicted to that adrenaline, and you kind of fall into that cycle where there has to be all this action, and eventually you increase your capacity to deal with it. But that's just one way to approach this opportunity thing. You go in fast because your opportunities, because everything you do is eliminating everything else. You move quickly, and you see if something works. If it doesn't, then you jump and you find that other thing because you don't want to miss your window. Now, the other approach, or another thing, now I talked about sort of a purposeful approach, and what happens there, and this is the deep part, and this is the really scary part. As high energy and high risk as the urgency or the fast moving model is, the reality is the stakes appear to be high, but in reality, failure is sort of encouraged. Failure is not catastrophic because your level of commitment is low. You go in, you test something, and if it doesn't work, you just move on to the next test. The other side is with the purposeful side. You have to sort of make a stand, and you make the bold move that says, okay, this is who we are and this is what we do, and we're going to work deeply with this. Now, with that commitment that you make, all of a sudden a lot of the noise that is in the environment sort of disappears for you because you aren't interested in all of the noise. You have a sort of a vision of where you're going. Interesting quote from the French philosopher Pascal. He said all of humanity's problems arise from man's inability to sit alone in a room. Another interesting quote, Mike Tyson, the boxer, when he was champion, he made a comment, the hardest thing about training once he got to the level of being a champion was the boredom. It wasn't the strenuous nature of the training, it was just so boring. And that boredom is what brought all the distractions into his life and ended up being his downfall. It wasn't the opponents, it wasn't the strenuous nature of the training, it was the boredom. So it's difficult to unplug from that fire hose of information and data and really sort of make a stand, and it's extremely risky. But the interesting thing is, and once you unplug from the noise, then you have to deal with this sort of void of feedback. You're used to seeing results, sort of the instant gratification world or that instant feedback world. You're used to being able to do something and test something quickly and see results. And once you get beyond the early stages of your development, when you're working deep, you can get some early wins. Like when you're first learning a new skill, you get the feedback, you get better really quickly. But what happens once you really get into it is it gets dark, it gets quiet, your progress slows down, and you don't have the feedback. You can't see yourself growing, and your taste doesn't grow at the same capacity of your skill, meaning you're doing work. If you're a writer, you're writing, and all the time that you're spending writing and working on your craft and reading is enhancing your ability to recognize good writing. But that taste is growing much quicker than your ability to produce that good writing, and it's frustrating and it's dark. Musicians, business people, anytime you really start getting deep into a creative endeavor or path or a long-term project, that dark period where you sort of recognize how much you suck. See, the beginning, when you're getting all those wins and you're getting all that positive feedback, it feels great. But once that progress slows down, you start really getting a clear picture of where you are, and it can be a daunting thing. That dark period is like the darkness before the dawn. It's like why so many people get all the way almost to the finish line and they give up because they can't deal with that dark period of frustration. and an emotional thing because your growth is invisible. You're getting stronger, you're getting better, and not in the ways that you can visibly see. So, and that's what makes it so scary. But and it's almost like a continuum. No matter how you start, if you ever want to do something that's really big, you have to make that commitment, and you have to make that transition to the point where you've unplugged from the noise and you begin to focus on a path. You begin to focus on a set of skills. You begin to let go of some of those options. You begin to dig in, and it's almost like a continuum. You start, you try ideas, and you jump from idea, and then you find something, then you commit to it, and then you start working deep, and then you start going deep, and it gets scary because you're not getting that feedback, and it's a difficult thing for both groups of people, companies, and individuals to deal with, because once you make that commitment, then you have to start bringing in other people. You have to start building some structure around in what you're doing, and you start making a deeper financial investment, perhaps different emotional investments for sure, and that ups the ante even more. But the thing is, this is the domain of mastery. This is the domain of substance. As long as you're jumping around and trying things and testing things and looking for openings and doing quick strikes, being opportunistic, then because you haven't made that investment, you can get that win and you can move on. But once you dig in and once you go deep, this is when the opportunity opens up where you can start becoming perhaps the best in the world at this thing that you found. This is the point where your skills can become undeniably good, but you have to break through. This is the point where you can make art that transforms people, when you can do something that's really special, not just kind of haphazardly, you got lucky, but something that when someone sees it, it moves them. When someone hears it, it moves them. When someone encounters your product, it changes their lives. You change people's lives at this level. So, I mean, nobody, you can't change the world when you're just playing around. So, at some point, you'll have to reach a point. At some point, you'll reach a level where, in the journey, where you have to decide, am I going to go deep? And you have to either put up or shut up. And either option is valid. I don't want to. Either option is valid. Neither one has a guarantee. Both have their own challenges. But the brave thing to do is to plant your flag in the ground, to plant your flag, and to identify yourself and stand up and say that this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I'm about. That's a scary choice, because once you claimed it, then you have to live into it, and then you have to ignore all of those things that come around you, and you feel like you're afraid that the world might pass you by while you're stuck in what Seth Godin calls the dip. When you're stuck there and what now? It's a scary thing, but it's a choice that if you keep going, you have to make it, and you have to do what's right for you. So that's been today's session of Notes from the Route. Thanks for, I'm sorry I'm late with it. Hopefully, but my carpet looks great, so it's worthwhile. See you tomorrow. We're going to do a recap for the week, and I'm glad that you're taking the time to watch this out. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're watching it on YouTube, you'll get it early. As soon as it goes out, as soon as it's live here, I shoot it straight to YouTube, no edits. I just let it ride like it is. Watch it on G+ if you want to take part in the conversation. You can watch it on my website, jaredforte.com/live. You can opt in on my website on the red bar at the top, and I'll send you a notification, a heads up, what the coming episodes are going to be about, so that you can get your questions in, your comments in ahead of time, and also get some bonus content That's exclusively for subscribers, the newsletter. So that's it. Hope y'all have a wonderful day. Thanks for checking out Notes from the Route.